Thank you. Thank you so much. I've got to tell you, I started counting, and I am so happy to be in front of people again. As a musician, there's no reason to create if you don't have a crowd to play for. And so the last year and a half has been torture for me. And this last month or so, I started to get out a little bit, and it fills my heart to have you here and listening. So I'm going to start off right away with the flutes, and then we're going to go into those a little bit deeper. There we go. Thank you. Thank you so much. The good thing in the year and a half that I didn't play, I didn't forget everything. My fingers have slowed down a little bit, but oh my gosh, it's good to be back and playing. So, I'm kind of doing a dress rehearsal for 2 weeks from now when I got to go to Cedarville University and again address the world music class there. And so this is a good rehearsal for me. At any time you have any questions, let's keep this very laid back. If you have a question, throw up your hand and I'll try to answer it. What I am playing are Native American style flutes. Anybody in school remember playing the recorder or the flutophone? Yeah. Most all of us have done that. We usually started that in like the 4th or 5th grade. And what these are, they're like the great grandparent of these, the flutophones. Music goes back so many years, a whole lot longer than we imagined. And so when I do school groups, I usually ask the kids, I say, how old is music? How long has music been here? I'm going to ask you, how long has music been around? Forever? Okay. Well, usually what the students will say, well, 100 years. And then they'll say, well, maybe 1,000 years. Well, we know for a fact that in North America anyway, that we've been making music for at least 5,000 years because they found a flute in the desert of New Mexico. I have a friend that got to pick this flute up and look at it. They found this flute, and it was a flute. It was made out of a piece of bone. It had 4 holes on it, and it had a blowhole on it. And they were able to radiocarbon date that piece of bone, and it radiocarbon dated to 5,000 years. So we know at least in North America, we've been making music with instruments like drums and flutes and that sort of thing for that long. What's more incredible than that is over in France, in a cave in France, they found another flute. And they realized it was made out of a leg bone of a cave bear. They radiocarbon dated that flute to be 43,000 years old. So that's a long time ago, isn't it? Most of the native style flutes are all in the pentatonic minor mode for you musicians out there. And I think that's why it kind of resonates with us. Some of the very oldest of church music was written in that pentatonic minor mode. And some musicologists even believe that that minor mode is encoded in our DNA. That's why that minor sound, that church sound, feels so familiar to us. I don't know. Yes, question already. Great.
I just wonder if you could play as a pentatonic scale.
Okay. She wants to hear the pentatonic scale. Oh boy, she's going to make me half whole. I haven't done this in a long time. That's a major scale there, right? All right. That's as close as I can come on the native flute. Now, you see all these flutes up here in front of me. Why do I have all those flutes? Well, unlike the metal flutes that we see in the concert bands, those flutes have, I think it's either 12 or 14 holes. And they'll have a key maybe up here that'll cover 2 holes down here. And with those flutes, you can play a chromatic scale. You have the sharps and the flats. With these native flutes, I don't have that. You know, I suppose I could design and maybe rob some keys off of an old regular flute and drill a couple more holes to get a couple more notes. That would be a whole lot of trouble to go to. And so what I do sometimes is I'll use 2 flutes on, well, probably the next song I'll use 2 flutes to get the range of notes that I want. Now this flute here is tuned to G minor. This is a D minor flute. And they go all the way up to a high C. And what happens is the lower the pitch of the flute, the longer the flute is, And the bigger the diameter of the flute, the shorter the flute, the smaller the diameter, the higher the pitch of the flute. And, you know, the earliest flutes, I have a flute that's almost 200 years old that was gifted to me, and it was tuned by an old Native American, and it's tuned totally different than what we would consider the Western scale. You know, he would burn a hole to make a note, and if it sounded good to him, he was happy with that. And so it's really hard to play some of the very oldest native style flutes. And what we've done, you know, we've tried to take these ancient instruments and bring them into Western music and what our idea of a scale is today. And it drives me crazy when I tune a flute. But yeah, different sizes, different pitches, and yeah, there's quite a few challenges. When I first started playing the flute, I was having trouble because I would start to write tunes for it, and I would hear in my head notes that I could not create on the flute. I can get some accidentals on it by doing a half a hole. Like in order to play Amazing Grace, you have to do a half hole. That note right there, I'm only half covering the tone hole, and that's very difficult to do. But yeah, haven't always been a flute player. I tell people I'm in recovery. I'm a recovering Buckeye. I was a trumpet player. I went to Ohio State. I was in the marching band for 3 years, back when Archie Griffin was running. And I'd never flown on an airplane. I came from a farm in Pickerington, Ohio, and my first time on an airplane was on a 747 flying out to Los Angeles for a Rose Bowl. And so, like I say, I was a music major, and I was studying music. I was a trumpet player, and I was playing in all kinds of bands. You name it, I was playing. I was even in an oompa band down at Schmidt Sausage House playing 3 nights a week, playing polkas. It wasn't until, I think it was 1997, when my wife started doing genealogy.com, that I'd kind of heard a rumor about my great-great-great-grandmother being Native American, and so we started looking into that. And that led me, of all things, to meet a Lakota Sioux medicine man. And I started learning about the Native American spirituality. And I was thinking, okay, well, I got to learn about what the instruments were that the Native Americans played. And that's what led me to the native flute. I went to Winter Fair in '97. There was a guy from Weatherford, Texas, Butch Hall was his name, and he was selling flutes that he had made. So I spent a couple $100 on a flute, and I took it home. And they're so easy to play. I learned how to play it that Saturday afternoon, and then on Sunday, songs started coming to me. And it was that, I think I was like 44 years old, and I finally realized what I wanted to do when I grew up. And so what I started doing, I started writing my songs for this thing, this crazy instrument. And then I remembered, okay, back in junior high, I took wood shop. It's a shame they don't have wood shop anymore, but I was taking wood shop, and I had to learn how to use a wood lathe. And I kept looking at that flute I bought, and you go, I think I can make one of these. At the time, I was a ground supervisor at Kenyon College, and one of the other trade supervisors, I said, hey, do you know where a guy could get an old used wood lathe? And he said, well, what do you want a used wood lathe for? And I said, I want to try to build a Native American flute. He goes, well, I've got this old one I'll just give to you. And so I had to do some work on it to get it so it would run. And I went about trying to make that first flute. And it's kind of funny, and it's almost ironic now. Here I am making a Native American flute, and I'm starting to fire up the wood lathe, and my old gruff industrial arts teacher, his name was, of all things, Mr. Hawk. And I suddenly remembered everything that I needed to remember about being safe and not killing myself with this wood lathe. I made that first wood lathe, and I went about tuning it, and it played. And it played well, and I thought, I'm going to be a millionaire. I'm going to be a millionaire. I'm going to be that guy going to the art show selling his flutes. I think it was the next 15 flutes I made wouldn't play at all. And so it's not like you can just get on, well, you kind of can now, but back then you just couldn't call up somebody, a flute builder, and say, hey, how do I build this flute? If you did find someone, they weren't going to give you their secrets. And so over the years, I did end up quitting my real job, driving around the country, selling my flutes. I've performed at some big flute festivals, and to date, I've made over 500 flutes. So you had a question, yes? She wants to know how I tune them. So when I take them off of a wood lathe, what I do is I build them in two halves, the same way the Native American would have built his flutes. They would take a tree branch and try to split it in half. So they would have two halves, and then they would gouge out the inside of the flute on one half and try to match it exactly on the other side of the half. And then they would glue the two halves together. Well, 300 years ago, what would they use for glue? They couldn't go to Walmart and get, Gorilla Glue. What do you think they would use for their glue? Pine pitch. Yes, very good, very good. So yes, they would heat it up, the pine pitch, put it on there, and then they would tie their flutes with probably 4 or 5 strips of leather. I just have the one here, and that would tighten it down and hold it together. And so I make them into two halves. The first day is like Forrest Gump's box of chocolates. It takes me 3 days to build a flute, and you don't know until the third day whether it's going to play or not. And so I'll route out the two halves, glue the two halves together, cut it in a square, then I spin it on a wood lathe, okay? And I have an idea of where the finger holes are going to be, and so what I do is I drill real small pilot holes, okay? And so like this, if this flute was going to be a G minor, what I would do, it would probably be about this long when I take it off of the wood lathe. I take it to a tuner, and I cover those pilot holes, and I play the note. And it's always really flat. It's almost a whole step flat. So then I start cutting it off about 1/8 of an inch at a time. And as I cut that off, that note comes up and finally it gets right dead on a G. Then I go up to the next note, take it to a tuner, it's really flat. And then I'll take a stone Dremel and I'll start to slowly make that hole bigger. And as I make this first hole bigger, the note comes up and it's right on pitch. And I work my way up to the top. And so what happens is, as I get them all tuned into the right pitch, the whole flute goes flat again, and so I have to go back and start over. And I don't take 1/8 of an inch off. I just take little bits of a time off, and I work my way till it comes right up to being in pitch. Now, I did have a little bit of a problem. You have to have it in your wood shop when you're tuning an instrument, or in the room you're tuning, it needs to be between 70 and 72 degrees for this part of the country. I can remember I was invited out to Zion Canyon, Utah, to play for the Zion Canyon Native American Flute Festival. And I was playing the backtracks like I am today, and so we flew out there. And I got up on the stage. I had a CD I gave to the sound man. He was going to run the sound for me. And it was like 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning, and it was way over 100 degrees. Okay, so he started the music, and I went to play that first note, and I suddenly realized, my flute has expanded and gotten bigger because of this heat, and so the pitch went down. It was flat. And so, I kind of panicked. Here, real quick, I've got to make this flute come up to pitch. And so this piece on top, they call it the block or the bird, I moved it around a little bit, and then with some air pressure, I was able to bring the note up. Same thing, I've played outdoors at outdoor festivals in early November, and the temperature drops, the flute shrinks, and everything goes sharp. And so, yeah, it's quite fun tuning these things. Any other questions? Clear back there. Yes, good question. And since I've got to do another program, I usually bring flutes that I've got split open in half that I pass around. It is the same diameter inside. The native flute, I think, is the only flute in the world that isn't hollow all the way through. I can't see you. Okay, it's a two-chamber flute. It's hollow from here up to this point here, and then there's a block in the center, and then it's hollow for a little space in here. Now, this piece on top, if I take it off, here's what they sound like. Okay, and what happens when I put this piece here on top, it creates a little wind tunnel for the air to go through. I call it a river of air. And so when I blow into the flute, air comes up a ramp underneath this block, and then anybody planning on being a flute builder? I'll tell you my secret here. I file a 22.5 degree angle underneath this front edge, and that splits that river of air. Half of the airstream goes down in the flute, starts churning and vibrating. The other half of that river of air just keeps on flying right past. And so what the flutes are, they're really just a whistle. And when I have all my fingers down, the whistle is this long. If I take this hand off here, now the whistle is this long. And so what I'm doing as I put my fingers up and down, I'm making a series of different length whistles. Good question. Good question. Okay, yeah, I started to say I would tune them right dead on concert pitch. Right dead on, every note. But then when I'd go to play with my backtracks, the flute would sound just a little bit flat. And that was driving me nuts. One day, I know a piano tuner. He used to tune down at the Ohio Theater. And I was talking to him, and somehow we got onto this conversation about my flutes being just a little bit flat. And he goes, oh, he said, I know what the trouble is. He said, anytime I tune a concert piano, he said, I always tune it just a little bit sharp because a sharp note will cut better. He said, you might try tuning your flutes just a degree or two sharp. So I did that, and lo and behold, that problem was solved. I have not shared that with any other flute builders. So don't go behind my back here. You know, when I first started out, we were traveling around. I was doing the big flute festivals and whatnot. And all these guys coming, all these flute builders coming in, you know, and they've got all these fancy flutes. It was like going to a car salesman, you know. This flute builder would say, well, I've taken obsidian and I've put obsidian up here and that cuts that river of air in half and my flutes are much better. And one guy put ceramic in the flute to collect moisture, I don't know. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, these guys, their egos are pretty high. And so I just try to make a very good sounding instrument. Let me play another tune for you. I'll use two flutes. I'll use the D minor and this. This is a tune that I wrote. I've written over 75 songs now. And almost every song that I've written has a story. It's like a movie that plays in my head. And back, I think it was the first or second year that I was doing the circuit. I was at a big flute festival down in Dayton at Sunwatch Village. Anybody been to Sunwatch Village down there? It's they've taken an old site that they've built the buildings like they had. It was the Fort Ancient Culture of Natives. And they had the flute festival down there. It's on the banks of the Little Miami River. It was running 3 days, and it was kind of slow on the last day, Sunday. And so I walked over by the river, and I sat down, and I was trying to imagine what it would have been like in that spot around that village, you know, 250 or 300 years ago. And this melody came to me, and I call it River Song. her some. Thank you. Thank you so much. It takes very, very little air to play a flute, a native style flute. Actually, um, I think it takes less air than the flutophone did. And being a trumpet player, I'm pretty windy. Ask my wife, she'll tell you how windy I am. It takes a lot of air to play the trumpet. And so I was in this habit of taking these great big gulps of air, Buckeye battle cry, and that took a lot of air. And so that's a habit that I was never able to break. And so that's why a lot of times I'll play out of the corner of my mouth. I'm putting air into the flute, but I've got all this backup of air. A lot of times while I'm playing, I'll let air escape out the corner of my mouth. If I don't do that, I get the hiccups a lot when I'm playing. And that is no fun, believe me. After I did the Zion Canyon thing, I got to be a feature performer. I got to give an hour concert in Washington, D.C. A great big flute festival there, and walked out on the stage, and they had all these lights, and I usually don't get too nervous. I've played enough that I don't get nervous, but I walked out there, and there was enough people out there that I forgot to play out of the corner of my mouth. And lo and behold, I did get the hiccups. And they weren't going away. Luckily, they had like 6 bottles of water on stage for all the different performers, and so I started drinking water. In between tunes, and anytime I could, I would drink water. And I had about 10 more minutes to go, and then I had a different problem, if you know what I mean. So, the life of a musician, I need to write a book about it. Any more questions? Okay, I'm going to play a tune now that I have to bring it up, but usually when I write a song, I have an idea of what the story is about. And that's the thing about playing a musical instrument and writing music. You don't have lyrics to tell the story. So it helps to be able to preface it explaining what you wrote the song about. And but this one tune, it came to me. I have a recording studio in my home. And the melody came to me, and I really liked it, but I just did not know what to call this tune. And so I started going out and playing it. I do a lot of facilities around Central Ohio, and I was out at Wesley Ridge in Reynoldsburg, and I said, "Hey, I'm going to play this next song, and I want you to listen to it, and then when I'm done, tell me what it makes you think of." And so I played it, and they said, "It's a very joyful song," they said. "It makes me think of joy." I said, "Okay." So I went to another facility, and I did the same thing. And I said, "What do you think we should call this song?" "I don't know. It's a very joyful song. It makes me pretty happy. Call it something to do with joy." Well, okay. That's 2 now. That's twice now. So then I was down at Canal Winchester at the end of Winchester Trail, and I played the song. They said, "Joyful." "Yeah, joyful." And there's a retired pastor down there that I've gotten to know. He said, "Call it the Songbird of Joy." I go, "Okay, we'll call it the song." That's very good. We'll call it the Songbird of Joy. So a month later, I was back at Wesley Ridge, and they have birds there. And I knew they had birds there, but I'd never heard the birds before. And I started playing this song, and these birds started singing, and I mean, they were singing at the top of their lungs, the Songbird of Joy. After I played that song, they didn't play it again. As Almighty God is my witness, every time I go back there and I play Songbird of Joy, these birds come alive and they sing. So I'm going to play the Songbird of Joy for you. There we go. And I use a higher pitched flute, so I kind of understand. It does kind of sound like a bird. bit of air guitar. Songbird of Joy. Thank you. All right, had to bring up the next song that I want. If you go searching to find music recorded on the Native American style flute, for the most part, what you're going to find is a native flute player playing his instrument to drums and rattles, or else they'll be playing to a backtrack of eagle sounds or bird sounds or crickets or a creek flowing or something like that. Not that many flute players have, background with real instruments, with the exception of maybe Carlos Nakai. Some of you have probably listened to Carlos before. And that was kind of my whole purpose when I started this, was to take this ancient instrument and unite it with modern instruments, mainly to gain the attention of the younger people to try to keep the instrument going. Because sadly, a lot of the instruments have gone extinct. And, luckily, because some of the flutes were made of bone, they have kind of survived. This instrument almost didn't make it because in the 1800s, the late 1800s, the United States government made it illegal for the native people to sing their songs, do their dances, or make and build their instruments. And so as a result, they had to kind of go underground with their instrument building and their music playing. And in the 1920s, a gentleman went back to the reservation and he started to reteach the crafters how to make the instruments. And so, it almost went away. Also, there's a lot of similarities between flutes across the globe. And we've come to realize that maybe our history books aren't exactly right. I don't think Christopher Columbus was the first white guy to come here. There's too many similarities between the native style flutes and the way they build them and the Japanese and the Chinese flutes, the way they build them. There was some trading going on. And also even some of the Irish flutes. There was some technology crossing oceans. And so what I'm going to do next, I'm going to play a tune more or less like you would have heard, back in the day around the campfire. And I'm going to play it with this thing. Do you see it? A double barrel, yes. A double barrel. You know, I used to go into preschools and play for them, and I get this flute out, and they go, "Oh, it's a double barrel." And I'm thinking, how do these guys know what a double barrel shotgun is, for Pete's sake? And, you know, it happened enough times that one day I finally got up the nerve. I go, "Young lady, how do you know that this is, oh, well, our video games, Call of Duty, you know, we've got these games, we shoot these guns and whatnot." And I go, "Oh, God save us." But so I'm going to play this double barrel, and you'll be able to tell on this song when I'm playing one barrel or when I switch to the double barrel. There we go. All right. You got a question?
What kind of wood do you use?
Oh, that is the best question. Very good question. I'm glad you asked that. For the most part, the soft woods, cedar, in this part of the country, red cedar. If they could get your hands on it, western cedar. The best sounding flutes are made out of the soft woods. I made so many flutes out of cedar, though. However, I had to switch because I was getting allergic to the sawdust, and so I switched to pine. Like this flute here, it's a high-grade pine, and then what I do up here, I inset it with walnut or cherry. Of the 500 flutes I've built, I was commissioned to build 2 out of oak, and I built them, but I'll never do it again. Oak is too hard, and the color of the sound was just too bright. The softer, the better the color of the tone is. Great question. Yeah. Yes. Well, depending on the flute, like I said, it takes 3 days to build one. It's like Forrest Gump's box of chocolates. You never know until the third day what you've got. They start out at about 139, and then a double barrel flute, I get up to about almost 275. Try to keep them affordable. There's flute builders out there that's get thousands of dollars for their flutes. There's a flute builder that I personally know as a friend. He's a great guy. And his flutes come out and he carves animal heads. They're beautiful. And then his wife paints the acrylics. They're beautiful to look at, but he just really doesn't tune that well. And he doesn't know my secret. And my whole, being a musician, I tune my flutes so people can play them with a piano or a guitar. So, yeah, good questions.
Does the sound come out from the end?
Good question. Most of the sound comes out from right here. That's why I use the mic there. Very little of the sound, and really very little of the air will come out. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
In Israel, we bought shepherd flutes,
Okay.
and the shepherd played pretty melodies on it, and none of us could make a sound.
Yeah, some of those flutes are very difficult to play. Like the pan flutes, they're the ones where you blow on them like you would a pop bottle. And I've made a few of those, but because I played trumpet for so many years, I've kind of goofed up my upper lip. My embouchure isn't best suited for a flute playing. And so what happens when I play the pan flute, I get dizzy as a bat. Some of the Peruvian flutes, you have to blow on the very edge, and they are very difficult to play. Yes. So yeah, now my wife, we've uncovered the Native American part. Now she's looking at the Irish part of the family, and so who knows? In a couple of years, maybe I'll be back here playing the Irish flutes. Yes, you had a question back there. A couple questions. Yes, I do. I compose everything. I do play, well, being a music major at Ohio State, you had to learn to play most every instrument. A lot of the stuff I'll do I have a very sophisticated keyboard. Some of the guitar work my son does, or I have had as many as 7 pieces in a band. We did a thing for Reynoldsburg Symphony Orchestra. High school orchestra wanted to have a guest speaker or a guest artist. And so they wanted to do 3 of my songs. And so I had to score out all my music for them. And they wanted 3 tunes. And then my 7-piece band and I performed it with them. And that was a thrill of my lifetime, to have my own music with 100 kids on stage playing my music. I cried like a baby. But to write it out, it was terrible. It took me forever. And especially the violas, writing in the alto clef, that's the clef that looks like a K. Oh, that like to drove me nuts. But it took me about 40 hours to do the first song, and then I was in the groove of things, and the other 2 only took about, 10 hours apiece. So good question. Yes, I do have CDs. I've recorded 5 CDs. I do have a few in the car. But this day and age, they've killed artists like me because, they don't sell CD players anymore. And I'm not savvy enough to sell my music yet on like iTunes or that sort of thing. But yes, I do have some CDs. If I got enough time later this afternoon, maybe I can run some in, or else I can give you a card and I can mail you one. How's that sound? The gentleman behind you had a question. Okay, very good. Oh my gosh, I'm running out of time. I can't believe how much. Sure. Well, here, I'll play one better than that. This guy, yeah, I don't have enough time to do all what I want to do. I'll have to come back. How's that sound?
We're not going anywhere, right? Yeah, that's right.
We're all retired.
Let's see. There we go. There we go. I'm going to get out the big guy now. And this guy is like the 2-year-old of all the flutes I've built and all the flutes I play. This guy is the hardest. He's like I said, he's like the 2-year-old. He's got a mind of his own. You never know whether he's going to behave or not. And in the wintertime when I play him, I tell him, okay, you either play well today or else you ride on top of the car on the way home. Mainly the finger holes are so small, they're so close together. And I talk to it when I play, so don't laugh too hard when I point my finger at it. If I'm pointing my finger at it, you know it's misbehaving, okay? So this is a tune I wrote one night. I had a dream about this, and I was down in the ruins of Mexico, and I was on top of one of the pyramids, and there was another flute player on the other pyramid way over, and we were calling back and forth. I call this the Mayan dream. Thank you so much for being such a good audience. I can't believe how fast time flies when I'm having fun.
It might get to ride home in the front of the car. Wow. It's behaving extremely well.
Again, thank you so much. I've enjoyed my time here.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. Thank you. Thank you.